Hey everybody, Michelle Mays here with you. I'm the clinical director of the Center for Relational Recovery and the founder of Partner Hope. And I'm here to have another conversation with you about betrayed partners and infidelity and cheating and all those good topics that we dive into here. So I'm coming to you from the sun porch today instead of my other office. And today I want to talk to you guys about the difference between sex addiction and infidelity. So the difference between an addiction that is addiction to sex versus an affair or an episode of infidelity. And then we wanted to look at why it is so important for you as the betrayed partner to really understand what sex addiction is and how important it is for you to be really thoroughly educated about it and have a deep understanding of what you're dealing with if your partner is sexually addicted. So the difference between sex addiction and an affair or infidelity that does not have compulsivity at the core of it is the compulsivity. So it is the compulsive nature of the behavior, the not being able to stop the behavior, going back to the behavior, a pattern of behavior over time, often a very chronic pattern of behavior that qualifies as sex addiction. So if your partner has had one affair or maybe even two affairs, that does not necessarily mean that they are dealing with sex addiction. That may just be an affair. If, however, you are seeing a pattern of affairs, or you're seeing an affair, but it's also accompanied by compulsive pornography use or other behaviors that feel patterned and compulsive, then you might very well be dealing with sex addiction. And when we're looking at sex addiction, what we're really talking about is a pattern of behavior that over time, even though the person may try to stop it, they may have made efforts to stop it, they may have promised themselves that they were going to stop it, they have not been able to stop the behavior. And they are experiencing negative consequences in their life. It's causing perhaps negative consequences in their relationship for you as their partner. So the negative consequences are starting to pile up. And even though there are negative consequences, they still continue the behavior. That is another indication that you are dealing with addiction rather than an affair that is an event, a single event. The other thing that indicates an addiction is when the behavior progresses. So the brain habituates over time to behavior when it is chronic and repetitive. And so if you see that there used to be porn use and that porn use was infrequent and occasional, and now all of a sudden it's daily, now it's happening every single day. Now when you sit down in front of the screen, you lose time. You think you're going to be there for 5 minutes and you're there for an hour. That is a sign of the behavior progressing. And that is a sign of the brain habituating to the amount of the behavior, to the behavior that you've been doing, and now escalating the need for more or different behavior in order for the brain to get the same response, the same stimulus to hit the brain. So when you see that pattern happen, you're also dealing with addiction. So understanding the difference between an affair and sex addiction is really important because treatment for these two things looks completely different. So how you treat an affair, how you treat an episode of infidelity, and how you treat a sex addiction are very, very different things. So understanding which one you are grappling with, which one is present in your relationship, is really important. Otherwise, you can spend a lot of time going down roads that are not going to be productive for you, while the suffering and pain in the relationship continues to get worse and continues to escalate. So for you as a betrayed partner, understanding what you are dealing with and understanding it really well, like really thoroughly educating yourself about what is sexual addiction and what does treatment look like, is imperative for your own healing process. So it can be easy to kind of feel like, well, this is his or her problem. doesn't have to do with me. They need to go get well. I don't need to, they just need to go deal with it. And sort of pull yourself out of the position of needing to know and understand what's really going on and needing to have thorough information about it. If you do this, though, what ends up happening is you profoundly disempower yourself in your relationship. So you need the information about what is sexual addiction, how does it function, what all is involved, what does treatment look like, what does recovery look like, what does the process of change actually look like, and how would we actually go about it. You need that information to be able to take an empowered stance in your relationship where you make good, healthy decisions to take care of yourself, and you make good decisions about the relationship as well. So we're going to talk about what it means. I've got my notes here that I'm looking at. We're going to talk about what it means for you as a betrayed partner. What happens if you don't understand sex addiction? What are the risks of not really understanding what is going on here? And some of why I'm talking to you all about this is I'm seeing in the Facebook group, I'm seeing folks that are clearly dealing with sex addiction, and I don't think they know that yet. I don't think they've gotten to the place where they have that understanding, or they haven't had resources come their way. They haven't had the ability to really learn about that yet. And so because of that, they've got a tiger by the tail and they have no idea what to do with it, and no idea what's really going on in their relationship, or even how to like move on to a path that would be a healing path. So that's why we're talking about this today, is to really help those of you who are wondering, like, is this sex addiction? Or I think it's sex addiction, but I don't really know what that means. I'm not fully understanding what that means. I certainly don't know what treatment or healing or the path of healing would look like for this yet. This is why we're talking about this, to try to help those of you who are in that place be able to kind of move to a different place and start to have the information you need and be able to move into a more empowered stance for yourself and for your relationship. So let's talk about what it means for you if you don't understand sex addiction. Why is it so important for you to have a really thorough understanding of what your significant other is dealing with if they are sexually addicted? So number one, if you don't understand sex addiction, then you are not going to understand what it takes to treat it. So I think addiction, having worked in this field now for almost 20 years and been dealing with addiction for much longer than that because I was dealing with it in my personal world, I think addiction is like the proverbial peeling of the onion. There are many layers to really understanding it and getting your head around what it really is. Sex addiction is extremely complex. It involves all these different systems in our body and our histories, our trauma histories, our childhood histories, our sexuality, our identity. It is a complicated phenomenon to treat. So if you don't understand sex addiction and you don't kind of start peeling the layers of the onion, then you're not going to understand what it takes to treat it. And because of that, you can have ideas about and expectations about what should be happening for your partner, for your addicted partner, that are wildly inaccurate and actually end up enabling the partner to stay in the addiction. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. You could think, okay, so they're addicted. They just need to stop it. They need to stop doing what they're doing. They need to use more willpower. We need to put them in therapy and so they can really work on their willpower and bring their willpower to bear. Well, so one of the things we know is that addiction actually does not respond to willpower, and that in fact, willpower often makes addiction worse. And willpower, you know, is kind of what we use a lot. So that's very confusing for a lot of people. Like, well, what are we supposed to do instead of willpower? You know, what do we do when it's not willpower? Well, exactly. This is why you need treatment. This is why you need an entire process that teaches you how to change at a deeper level that isn't just about willpower, which is finite and runs out. And if you doubt this, I want you to look at your typical day. Just watch yourself and think about your typical day and how when you get up in the morning, you're thinking, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. This is how my day is going to go. This is what's going to happen. And then I want you to think about where you're at noon and where you're at 5 and where you're at 8. And what you're going to see as you go through your day is that you lose your willpower. This is why so many people end up eating bad food in the evening. They've run out of willpower. They had a great breakfast, they had a great lunch, and then it was over for the rest of the day. Or they got out of bed and they intended to work out. They had a workout plan. They were going to do it in the afternoon. And by the time the afternoon came, they couldn't do it because they were out of willpower. Willpower is a finite resource, and we use it up all day as we go about our day. So it is not a reliable resource for addiction by any means. So if you don't understand addiction, you don't understand the complexities that are being dealt with, and you don't understand the deeper, it's called second order change that needs to happen, which is long-term permanent change. It's not just surface level change. So if you don't understand what creates that kind of change for a person, then you can fall into this belief that your partner just needs a little bit of therapy and they just need, to stop doing what they're doing, and they need some more willpower to be applied. And you fall into sort of enabling the addiction, even though you don't mean to, and sort of colluding with the addiction because you're actually not aware of what it would actually take to arrest it, what it would actually take to treat it. So it's really important that you, as the betrayed partner, start to really wrap your head around addiction, treatment for addiction, what is going on here, so that you don't think about it in a simplistic way, and you don't kind of look at your partner and expect them to be able to do things that they simply can't do with a much higher level of support and intervention around them. All right, so that's number one. Number two, if you do not understand sexual addiction, if you are in a relationship with a sex addict, then you are going to be very vulnerable to misinformation from them. And here's what I mean by that. They could go off to therapy and they can come home and give you what I like to call a curated version of the therapy. And what that means is, I'm leaving some stuff out. I'm telling you what I want to tell you, and I'm not telling you what I don't want to tell you. And you don't know, you're none the wiser, because you aren't aware of how treatment typically goes, the things that the therapist would typically be telling somebody who is sex addicted, the expectations that would be being laid out for the person around their treatment. You don't know these things. So when they come home and they say to you, yeah, no, the therapist thought that it would be fine if I just came in, every other week or so, and we'll just meet and talk, and that's all that was really needed. You will be vulnerable to believing that. And I can guarantee you that there is no trained sex addiction therapist who has an active sex addict come in and who says, yeah, why don't you come in every couple weeks, few weeks, that'll be fine, because you can't do anything with addiction when you treat it that way. So it leaves you vulnerable to misinformation, and not, again, being in that empowered stance where you know what is the typical pathway of treatment, what is the typical map that people follow, and what is going to be needed. All right, third thing that can happen when you as a betrayed partner don't understand sex addiction is that you can end up not having a vision for what real recovery is. So one of the things that happens when you understand sex addiction and you really educate yourself about it and about recovery is that you start to create a vision for yourself about, oh, this is what this would look like if we really went down the path together of recovery and of repairing our relationship. This is what that could look like. This is what it will take to do that. And you start to get a vision for how life would change, how the relationship would change, how things between the two of you and internally would change. I think about recovery as, we have the Center for Relational Recovery, right? So we're talking about relational recovery always. And so when I think about recovery and I think about relational recovery, it is a change in your relationship with yourself, a change in your relationship with others, including your significant other, and a change in your relationship with systems of larger meaning and purpose, like your higher power. So it's those three things. But in recovery, those get completely restructured and completely altered. You are going to have a vastly different understanding and relationship with yourself and others at the end of recovery than you do at the beginning. So what can happen if you don't understand addiction as a betrayed partner is that you think the bulk of the work is just around getting sober. You're looking for the person to stop their behaviors, and most betrayed partners are in so much pain and suffering as a result of the sexual betrayal that of course you want the pain to stop. Like, nobody's blaming you for that. That is just normal. You want the pain to stop. And sobriety seems like the way that the pain stops. The person stops the acting out behaviors, they stop the lying, and now you can get out of that acute trauma reaction that happens when the person is acting out and actively lying. However, this is just the beginning. Like, getting sober is actually the easy part of recovery. It's the first step of recovery. After that, you have to learn how to live life without needing to medicate. You have to learn to live life in a way that helps you do attachment and relationships in a very different way. There is so much to recovery that is far beyond sobriety. So you, as a betrayed partner, having an understanding of sex addiction lets you create a vision for yourself and your relationship of what would recovery look like for us, and to hold that vision and to pursue that vision, like to actually have something that you are aiming toward and headed toward, which is what you want. You want a goal to pursue here. So without understanding addiction, you're not going to really understand that whole big world of recovery where there are so many gifts that happen for each person. All right, so fourth thing that affects you if you don't understand addiction is you're going to be very vulnerable to being gaslighted. So this kind of goes with the vulnerable to misinformation one, but it's a little different in the sense that you're going to not understand all the ins and outs of what's going on with the person, what's driving the addiction, what's going on with their arousal template, with how they manipulate themselves, how they gaslight you. You're not going to have that information, and it's going to leave you vulnerable to being gaslighted, to continue to be lied to continue to be gaslighted by your partner. When you really understand what's going on, you have information. And so when they tell you something that you know is not true, rather than it creating confusion and kind of sending you into that swirl of confusion and chaos that can happen internally when you're experiencing gaslighting, you'll be like, well, wait a minute, I know that's not true. I know that because of this, this, and this. So I know I'm being lied to right now. I know I'm being manipulated right now. And now I can deal with that rather than going into the confusion and the chaos. So having this information helps you equip yourself to not be gaslighted in the same way that you can be if you don't have this information. And believe me when I tell you, the amount of times that we hear partners tell us things that the addicted partner told them that are patently untrue, that were never said, that are not accurate, that are misinformation, that are just pure gaslighting, is a lot. We do hear that a lot, especially at the very, very beginning of the process when the addict is still doing a lot of lying and a lot of gaslighting. The more information you have as a partner, the less susceptible you are to that working on you, to actually falling prey to that. So that's another reason. All right, so last reason that it's really important for you as the betrayed partner to understand sex addiction is that if you do not understand addiction and you do not understand recovery, then you can be very vulnerable to shortcutting out of the treatment process. And here's what I mean by that. You can be very vulnerable to trying to figure out how to take shortcuts and not have to do the whole kit and caboodle that is addiction treatment. Now, let me just say this. Everybody who comes in and figures out, this is what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with sex addiction. Everybody, whether it is the addict or the betrayed partner, goes through this phase of trying to get their head around what this means. Because what you find out very shortly as you enter into that process, if you're getting good treatment, is this is going to be a process. It is going to require time. It is going to require energy. It is going to require money. It is not cheap to get treatment. Divorce is also very expensive. So you kind of have to weigh that all out, right? But it does have to become like a line item in your budget for a while. It takes time. You have to change your schedule. It takes energy. You have to fit everything in. It becomes your part-time job. And for a lot of people, they look at that. They look at the amount of change and effort that is going to be required of them in order to get well. And they look at it and they say, I think I can do it differently. I think we can do it. I think we can do it differently than that. I think we could like pick and choose and not do this and not do this and not do this, and we'll still have the same outcome. That is not the case. If you want the outcome of long-term recovery, long-term stable sobriety, a repaired and healed relationship, a new way of doing life that doesn't require being addicted and medicating, then you're going to have to do it all. You can't pick and choose. You can't try to shortcut out of the process. So I see a lot of people go through what we call a bargaining phase, where they're bargaining with the addiction, and betrayed partners go through this as much as the addicts do, because everybody has to get their head around being in a big old change process. And when you're dealing with addiction, you are trying to turn the Titanic around. You are not turning around a little speedboat, right? You are turning the Titanic around. It is a slow, big process to do it. It isn't quick and fast, right? So again, this is because of the level of complexity that we're dealing with when we're dealing with sexual addiction and betrayal trauma. It's very complex. It's very complicated. So trying to shortcut the process actually ends up increasing your suffering. So what I see happen for couples and individuals who do this is that they come in and they're like, well, you know, rather than go to 3 12-step meetings every week, I think we'll just do one. We'll do individual therapy every other week rather than weekly, and we're not going to do group. So kind of the 3 things that everybody does in addiction treatment are 12 steps, therapy, and group therapy. Those are your 3 foundational things that you're going to do. And of all 3 of those, the group therapy is the most effective modality to do. So, but all of them together are what is highly effective and what you see people do. And we can take our client list at the center and pretty much draw a line down the page. And the folks who are doing well, who have changed their relationships, who are thriving, they have done all 3 of those things all the time. We almost never see somebody move into thriving and flourishing after sex addiction betrayal without it. So if you come into treatment and you're trying to figure out how to shortcut out of it, and I don't want to have to do so many meetings, I don't want to have to take the time for this, I don't really want to get a sponsor, I don't like the 12 steps, 12 steps are too religious, or the 12 steps are too non-religious, I hear both. So all of these excuses to try to avoid the process and surrendering to the process of change. So when you do that, you actually prolong your suffering. So, you know, I've often said to clients, you know, if they'll be like a year in and they'll have spent the entire year trying to do it their way and not doing what we're recommending to them, not doing what we're saying, hey, this is what you need to do. And then they come in and they're like, this is taking so long, things aren't getting any better. And, you know, I always look at them and say, you know, right, like I told you at the beginning, if you made the choices you were going to make, it was not going to get better and it was going to take longer. Like you're now doing this the most painful, lengthy way you can, and by the way, the most expensive way you can. So if you would instead get your head around it at the beginning and dive into it and accept that, yeah, this is going to be like a intensive process for a while, then you go through it. You get through it, you get through the intensive process, and then you get to normalize more of your life quicker. And you also do not have as much pain and suffering, because you're on a path to real healing and real recovery. So often the folks who are trying to figure out their own little road are the ones where there isn't sobriety, there isn't disclosure, the lying isn't stopping, and the whole system of the couple is just in this constant return to the pain of betrayal as they go through rounds and rounds and rounds of it. So for you as the betrayed partner, when you understand, okay, this is what's involved here, and you do your own process of getting your head around it and coming into acceptance that this is what's going to have to happen for real change to happen for you and for your relationship, then again, that lets you operate from an empowered stance. You know then, okay, these are the boundaries and bottom lines that I need for myself in this relationship. This is what I need to expect. I need to not settle for less. If my spouse comes home and tells me, oh, the therapist told me that I don't really need this or I don't really need that, I know that I'm being gaslighted and that's probably not true at all. And I need to check it out. So really doing that work helps you as a betrayed partner operate from a much more empowered stance in the relationship and really get into recovery, kind of dive in with both feet, and you will go much faster and you will have much less pain when you can do that. It will really speed you forward and help you avoid a lot of the pitfalls that people can fall into that create a lot more suffering for them. Okay, so that is why it is so important for you as the betrayed partner to really understand sex addiction and educate yourself about it. So on August 8th, we are having our Foundations for Recovery, Understanding Sexual Compulsivity workshop. This workshop is designed to educate you and your addicted partner about sex addiction. It is like your primer to help you really understand what it is. So we typically offer this at the center, and we usually charge $199 for that workshop, and we've discounted it down to $99 to try to make it affordable and accessible to as many people as possible. And we've put it online to try to be able to reach as many folks as possible. And we decided to do it right now just because of what I'm seeing in the Facebook group and how many of you really need this information. So I hope that you will take advantage of it and that you'll come to this workshop and really get all the info that you need. So I also know that we're dealing with like lots of time zones. We are an international group. And so what we've done is I'm going to give it live at, I think it's 10:30 on Saturday the 8th, but we're going to also do a recording of it. And we're going to post that so that those of you who are in a time zone that just doesn't work for you, or you've got a conflict, you can still watch it. And so that'll be posted for a couple of days. I think we'll get it up probably by Monday morning following the workshop, and we'll have it online for about 48 hours or so for folks to watch. So, or rewatch. Some of you may want to watch it more than one time to really get the information because it is meaty. There's a lot of information that we're going to cover. So here's what we're going to talk about, just so you know what to expect if you do come. So when we're talking about sex addiction, we're talking about 3 different bodily-based systems that are all involved in sex addiction and underlie it. So all that's going on in these systems are involved. So we've got the neurochemistry of the brain. We've got what happens in the brain when there is what happens to the pleasure center when there is a pattern of behavior that over and over and over again hits the pleasure center, creates reward, and then starts to create a pattern of stimulus and response, and then habituation happens in the brain. We're going to unpack all of that. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at the attachment system. So for folks who are sexually addicted, their attachment system, how they do relationships, how they learned to attach and connect, are 100% involved in the sex addiction and involved in driving the acting out behavior. So understanding how that connects, what's going on there, how it all shapes up together, we're going to do a deep dive into that. And then the third system that we're going to look at is we're going to look at the affect regulation system. So this is the bodily based system that regulates your body and your emotions. And again, all 3 of these systems are highly interconnected. So affect regulation and attachment and neurochemistry of the brain, highly interconnected. All of them impact one another. But understanding the way that each one specifically interacts with sex addiction and drives it, these are the underlying dynamics that are driving the behavior. So we're going to take a deep dive into that. We're also going to look at arousal template. We're going to look at what it is and why it's so important to understand it. We're going to look at how you define sobriety and what is long-term, when do you actually achieve long-term stable sobriety? And if you're having trouble with sobriety, what typically is the problem? What's usually causing the problems with sobriety, with not getting sober and staying sober? We're going to look at the self-manipulation defenses that the cheating partner, the addicted partner develops around the addiction in order to deceive you. So these are the self-manipulations that also then feed into the gaslighting. We're going to look at that. And then we're going to look at what the path of recovery looks like and kind of what the map is that you go down in the stages of recovery that happen for folks. So we're going to do all of that in that workshop. And I hope that you'll be able to join me and that you'll really be able to get information that empowers you and makes you feel like you are informed and you have a good foundation under you about what's going on in your relationship and what the path is forward. And I hope for those of you who are, kind of brand new and just trying to figure it out, that it's a real game changer for you. And you start to go, okay, this is what's going on here. And this is how we deal with it and move forward. So I hope I see you there, and I will see you all next week. Take care.